Welcome to Cutting Edge Catholics, a podcast of renewal, reconstruction, and resistance by voices within the independent Catholic movement. For more information on inclusive Catholicism, please visit extraordinarycatholics.faith. And now, meet your hosts, Reverend Dr. Trish Sullivan-Bonney and Reverend Dr. Jayme Matthias.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Catholics, a podcast of renewal, reconstruction, and resistance. I'm Father Jayme Matthias.
And I'm Reverend Trish Sullivan-Bonney.
And for this episode, we have a truly special guest, Reverend Trish.
Well, I am tickled to death to have Jayme Matthias, my dear friend and partner in crime on so many levels with our movement, meeting and getting to know my amazing friend and partner in crime here in Eden Prairie for literally decades, Joan Howe-Pullis, who is the director of Justice Ministries at the very large Roman Catholic parish where I raised my family. I like to call this community our family of origin. We're very blessed in that in our situation here in Eden Prairie as an independent Catholic congregation, we have had a very open and collaborative and kind relationship with the church that formed so many of us. And the truth is, we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this very vibrant lay-led Roman Catholic Church. So Joan is the director of Justice Ministries there. She and I have been partners in crime for literally 30 years now, doing all kinds of things. We were on a lay preaching team together. We ran everything from, vacation Bible camp to various justice activities. I've sat at a lot of tables getting signatures with her and things like that, as well as we've been active in our city together on a number of levels. Joan, like me, was somebody who sort of found her passion for ministry later in life. I was alongside her with great excitement, and she with me doing our higher level degrees. Joan has a master's in arts and leadership from the United Theological Seminary, one of our wonderful collaborative seminaries here in the Twin Cities, and a master's degree in human development from St. Mary's University, also here in Minneapolis and also in Winona. So I'm really excited, Joan, that you're with us because you have just an amazing experience in ministry, but you also bring a perspective that's really shaped my thinking in terms of what does it mean to be active for systemic change? What does it mean to be an ally? I've learned so much from you about being an ally. So what else would you want to add? You get a chance to add a little something there.
Oh, no. Oh, I think that's awesome. I guess the only thing to add is that we just continue to learn something new every day because that's the nature of the work. And we shape each other. It's not one way or the other. It's always reciprocal. So I appreciate the kind words, Trish, but it's all reflected back at you as well. It's in the conversation that we grow. So thanks.
Yes. I mean, you and I have learned the dance of conversation together, So one of the things about our movement, Joan, and I know you know this because you know my community, and also Spirit of Hope out in Sunfish Lake, we tend to be smaller. We range from some communities are more like small Eucharistic communities that are meeting, 10 or 15 people. Some of us are, really structured as more traditional church faith communities like the Charis community. Some of them are much larger. Jayme leads a very vibrant, larger community with a very nice size assembly as well as quite a few talented clergy that minister alongside him, men and women. And, but one of the things that I have struggled with is the whole question of how do we, particularly when we're smaller, mobilize people for action around justice. We're very proud as a movement of the structural changes that we've had the license to make that are about justice. So if you're a gay couple, as you know, you can be married in our churches. Here I am sitting with a collar on. You can be ordained if you're a woman, married person, gay person. So we've made some systemic structural changes, but we're still, called to not have church be something that happens on Sunday morning inside a building, right? But something that happens, out in the world through our presence. So I just want to kind of hear from you a little bit about your experience, mobilizing ministry, and what are the steps that you took. You came into an enormous community, but the truth is, like, I know from my own experience there that you can have 6,000 households and only 20 people who show up for something. So this idea
Yeah,
of cultivating people and developing them, I just would love to hear, some of what you've learned in this decade that you've been in parish ministry.
sure. So I guess one of the things I would say is that I was a member at Pox for many, many years before becoming somebody on staff in the role that I'm in. And as a member, what was good was that I had my own experience of being a member and how I sort of opted in or out of various conversations as they went along, and how the call to action kind of was tugging at me for a while, but trying to figure out how to make that all work with how life works. So I think that the being in deep relationship with the community, coming on staff when I did, was helpful to me because I was already in that inquiry for myself and already sort of in relationship. But then in the position I came into as the justice person, there was an ongoing set of conversations going on in the circles of people that were meeting around justice that had to do with systemic change, because it's in our purpose statement that that we're not just about, not, I don't mean just about, but we're about direct service, direct, like support and resources for people who are marginalized, but also about systemic change. And what I discovered in that first several months was none of us were talking about the same thing. When we were saying, oh, yeah, this is what we mean by systems change, it was a whole range of understanding because of the water we swim in our social, in the places where we live and work and where we were educated and so forth. And we all already thought that we were all on the same page, but we were not at all on the same page. So in that first year, it was like, okay, how do we address this? And fortunately for me, it was just circumstances. A friend of mine, not related to my job at all, told me about this event at the Kaleo Center for Faith and Justice and Social Transformation. And I went to it, and that's when I learned about the program at United Theological Seminary, which was about how faith communities bring their conversation of faith to action in the world. And how are we going to do that? And I went right back to my job that week and said to the parish director and pastor, I'm thinking of doing this program. Maybe I'll do a certificate program. I was really encouraged to do the master's program, do the full program. And then I was off to the races. So what was great about it was the program was embedded in, this was at United Theological Seminary here in the Twin Cities. You were embedded in your context. So everything I did in the program was looking at what we were doing at our church and all of the ways in which leadership for faith is expressed in a faith community and all of the different competencies for leadership. And so it was a really good way for me to also get related to, there isn't one way to be working for systemic change. It all works together for that. And then we're each actually independently gifted and have our own experiences, and we're called to various levels of not levels, various expressions of leadership. No one is more important than the other. And all of that is like mind-blowingly I think the vision of actually every human being is sacred and every human expression is sacred, and we're all meant to create this together. So it was, 2.5 years of critical analysis, conversations with people who were interested in having that conversation at Pax Christi, developing the project for social change and doing it. And all of this in the midst of a global pandemic and several leadership changes at Pax Christi at the same time, which of course upended things and created things. But what I was able to do because of that dedication to that program and what that did for me was I could see and track, and I had data year over year, so that when we were meeting in rooms where somebody would inevitably say, and I think this is really typical, somebody would inevitably say, well, we do all these things and it makes no difference. But I could say, hold on, let's go back to where we were 2 years ago having this conversation, and now we're having this one. It made some difference. We actually are moving somewhere. We're actually getting somewhere. And we're not all on the same page. We never will be, but we continue to do this. And so for myself, it was a great deal of hope and trust, and but also getting also that it's always about, we're continuing to move, that we're never getting to a destination. The destination isn't a real thing, because we're constantly unpacking where systems have affected our own perception of what justice looks like, of what true solidarity is, of what freedom from oppression, what Jesus was proclaiming, the first public thing he proclaims, the Isaiah reading, this scripture passage is fulfilled in your hearing, like the absolute complete absence of oppression is what we're going for. And we're each going to perceive that differently because of our social location and the water we're swimming in all the time. Mm-hmm. So sorry, that was a long answer, but
that's okay. I love it. And the total absence of oppression. I mean, I love the vision.
Joan, what an absolute delight to have you here with us this morning. I just want to say that there's just something beautiful about speaking about social ministry. I think the words that come to mind is faith in action for me. How it is that our faith expresses itself in real concrete ways. And I just want to say, from my perspective here in Austin, Texas, that there are many of us throughout the nation who are bowing our heads in the direction of y'all there in Minnesota, in Portland, in Chicago, and in other places, because you as people of faith have really been showing us what it means to put our faith into action. So to see so many faith leaders putting their bodies on the line, their necks on the line, to stand up with our siblings in need has really been a tremendous, tremendous example for all of us throughout the country. And what I love in your words, Joan, not only is this element of Catholic social teaching that you introduced for our listeners, but also how it is that it just sounds like you're a real systems thinker. I had a professor once who said every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets, and it keeps me thinking about how it is that there are so many, there are so many systemic injustices and social sins against which we as Catholics and as people of goodwill need to be pushing. So I just really, really appreciate your perspective. I'm wondering, it was fun to hear a bit about your own story and your vocation. We tend to talk about vocation a lot in the church, how it is that God calls us to the places where we are. If you might be able to talk about this, your own call, and how it is that you are putting your faith into action in concrete ways, and those around you, and how it is that we might encourage our listeners as well to be reflecting on their own daily lives and thinking about how it is that we can be bringing more justice to our world through ordinary and perhaps not so ordinary ways.
My own call. I think the first access for me is really the foundational liturgical practice of the church. So I know early on in some of the relationships I was building here in Minnesota, I have a friend who was asking me about, what do you mean faith practice? What are you talking about, faith practice? And at that time, I think the biggest piece of faith practice for me was liturgical practice, coming and participating in the assembly at Sunday worship, and then participating more specifically in music ministry and the lector ministry and all of those ways. And that the liturgical practice for me, as we say in the Catholic Church, is source and summit. It actually walks us through sort of this whole way of first, being together, first also asking for forgiveness for the places that we've failed, knowing that practice is relational. It's done in community. It's done with, after Vatican II, full conscious active participation by the assembly, that we are ministers of that practice as well. And it kind of was the end of the thing for me each week, but it also, I knew it was food for me for the week to be in my life. And then ultimately, as I began to really think more deeply or feel more deeply or just be in life longer. Like the longer you're in life and recognizing that there are places where you're feeling disconnected or thinking that the conversations you're having with people out there don't seem to matter very much. And it's not this is not where my longing is. I went a little bit deeper into saying, well, what does this practice actually mean and what's it pointing toward? I was invited in various ways by the faith community to go deeper into that practice, and being invited into the lay preaching team as a lay Catholic woman was just completely opened up a whole world of being in a small community within my community of people that supported each other to say, what does this scripture really mean in my life? You know, what am I being called to? And what is my community being called to? Because if we say this is our faith, we're being called to something outside of feeling good on Sundays together. So I think that's the start of it. That's a big start of it. I mean, that was a beautiful experience for me, over which I will never get, to be part of that lay preaching team and the community that meant for us and for me, in learning about who I am in my faith and then what else am I being called to do.
Joan, I just have to have a follow-up question to that because you introduced this sort of systems thinking way of approaching
Yeah.
all of this. I'm wondering how you can help us as listeners. Any thoughts that you have on respect to how it is that we can better take on large systems? So I served on the school board here in Austin for 8 years, helping to
Yeah.
oversee 130 public schools with 86,000 students and 11,000 employees. And one of the real takeaways was that when you're talking about large systems, it is so difficult to introduce change into those systems. So especially for those systems that are producing injustice in our world in any way, thoughts on how it is that we as people of faith best take on and tackle such injustices when perpetrated by large systems.
Yeah. You served in community, right? So in the school system, right? You
Right,
served there.
right.
Um, and so your participation, taking that on and being part of the conversation in the community made a difference in that. I know there was a opportunity that I had to discuss Catholic social teaching with some folks at our church, and somebody said, well, what am I supposed to do? And I just asked the person, like, what do you do for a living? And this person was somebody who was a realtor. And I said, well, where do you see the places where the system on housing works for some people, but not other people? Is there a way inside of your profession that you could make a difference for that? Or, at least do an inquiry for yourself about how that goes and what it means, right? What in the spaces where you're influential. And I want to say that later on, when I served on a task force here in Eden Prairie on housing, this particular person actually had put his hat, I didn't know it until the first day we all gathered, but he had put his hat in the ring to serve on the task force also, and served on the task force with us for a year and 18 months. That's to me like, you need to, I think you have to go where you're called, and you think you have to do and trust that you're making a difference where you are. And the bigness of it keeps many people small. And we have no idea what kind of influence we actually can have as long as we're in the room. And I think that's what helps me, because it's all way too big, but we just can't stop. We need to just keep moving forward into the places. For me, it's been housing, and I can't even tell you why, but for me, it's been housing here in Eden Prairie. It's really, really important to me. And so I figure out all sorts of ways that I can be part of that conversation. Also, I want to say another thing. Inside of church structures, what I've discovered in these conversations in groups of faithful people is that once you start to talk about the issues out there, frequently the conversation in the room comes back to our own system and our own structure within our community. And so we're making our communities better and developing better strategies for deeper conversations and everyone getting a chance to have their say, because working on those things out there bring us back to how do we want to be with each other, the 25 of us that are sitting in this room together right now? So that's going to mean everything. That gives me hope that all of it can change. It has to. That's what we're working for. But that's just right where you are, however you can do it.
I'm so struck, Joan, by two of your anecdotes about asking good questions is in the background of both those anecdotes. So like coming in and seeing that everybody had a different answer to the question, what is systemic change?
Yeah.
Right. I never even thought to ask that question as a leader in this community. Like, what do we mean when we say that? And even just beginning that conversation is amazing. And then, turning to your realtor friend and saying, oh, okay, well, where do you work? So it strikes me that like part of what I've seen in you, and I think it's the role that all of us as ministerial leaders play when we're in healthy systems, is to ask good questions and then to really listen for what the answers are too. So I'm wondering like what kinds of questions you bring to your ministry. I've watched you, for example, lead in the city through your efforts at Pax Christi around the indigenous people in our region, and you did a lot of education, and you brought people in, and you influenced Interfaith Circle. Joan is the chair of the board of a nonprofit that I'm on the board of. You influenced Interfaith Circle to have an open consciousness around the issue about a return of a sacred rock here. So I'm just wondering, like, what are the kinds of questions that are there for you as you started, as you continue to mobilize, that could help us think about what the right questions are for us in our different contexts?
Great. I guess one of the ways in which questions have been informed for me, I want to kind of give tribute to an organization called Just Faith Ministries that's out of Louisville, Kentucky. Just Faith programming is just beautifully created to have people of faith center in their sacred text in a small faith community over a particular issue for several weeks in a row. And all along, the questions are, what's the issue? What is the thing that we're struggling with? What's the issue that we see as kind of an injustice that we're noticing and we're not knowing what to do with? And then it's, so what? Why does it matter? And why does it matter usually also is informed by that looking at sacred scripture, but also why does it matter, like, to me personally? And then we share that in the group. And then the now what? So what are we called to, how are we called to respond to that? And that can be individually, and it can also be collectively. Just Faith always encourages those small groups to come up with something that they can do together collectively, because we're always smarter when we're doing it with a whole group than just our individual call. So the what, the so what, why does it, and then now what are sort of the broad questions. But there was one particular program that I continue to think that this is really connected to this idea of systemic change and also freedom from all oppression. There was one of the Just Faith programs earlier on that what they were asking about in terms of a particular issue was, the first question was, I'm blanking on it. Hold on one second. I have a note here because I was thinking about this earlier. Is it humane? So we're talking about a particular aspect of policy, the way that we've organized something societally, either by law or policy or just habit. Is this humane? Does it work for the common good? And boy, we really have to unpack what common good means, because it's one of those things too that people really don't have the same definition on. And then, does it support the dignity of the human person? And if the issue that we're talking about doesn't meet those three criteria that we have to unpack, then we say this is something we have to dig in and work on. And those are the kinds of questions that in groups, frequently you'll have somebody give a reasonable answer to it, like, well, I mean, maybe yes, we need to work on it, but this is all we can expect right now. And then for my perspective, what I want to do is bring people back to, okay, that's not the question we're asking here. Whether or not we're going to get a win on this legislative session isn't the question in this group. The question in this group is it humane? Does it work for the common good? Does it support the dignity of the human person? We have to start with that. Let's not bother with that because it's not going to be reasonable, or we're not going to get anywhere on it right now. So, and that really then does make folks that are relatively comfortable get a little bit uncomfortable. And it also helps folks to know that if I'm comfortable enough to say we're not going to make this win now, so we should table it, they also are confronted with their own privilege or their own comfortability in comparison to the people who are marginalized that we say our faith says we are responsible to. So those are the big questions for me. Yeah.
Joan, what I love is that what you're really talking about is the best of Catholic social teaching and helping people to understand that in simple language. That is to say, when you ask questions like, is it humane? That goes back to this concept in Catholic social teaching of dignity for the human person, right? Does it work for the common good? That is such a long time principle in Catholic social teaching, is for us to be thinking about the common good instead of just thinking about me, me, me. So I just really love that you're distilling these into simple ways for us and our listeners to be able to really take something away from this, some real pearls of wisdom. The questions that you ask with respect to just faith, the what, the so what, and now what, I just think is really powerful for me, because I'm always trying to find simple ways to be able to help to communicate various messages, which I think leads to my next question with respect to Catholic social teaching, and that is, have you and or others found ways in which those of us who've learned these concepts of Catholic social teaching can help to better articulate them to folks who are not so much interested in the theology so much as who are interested in, frankly, the concept of justice in our world? Are there ways for us to bridge these concepts of Catholic social teaching to these current events in ways that Catholics and others might really be able to latch on to a little better, a little more easily?
I think it does take a little perseverance and a desire to kind of go deeper in. Like, what I would like to do is unpack common good also, again, because I think when we think about it in a sort of a traditional, at least from my perspective, a way that people see democracy is like, the issue that wins, or the side that wins, is like more people wanted this, so that's more of the common good than not. It's like so much deeper than that. And I think that the simplicity of saying to people, well, if somebody is left out of being part of the good, that's not the common good. And so that's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple idea. If you're leaving somebody out, then it's not the common good. And all of the social teaching leads to that. It's why there's the rights of workers, and that people have the right to organize for work so that they get a fair wage so they can participate in an economic system. I think the key for me has been to really kind of ask people about the systems that they see that are unjust. And if they can start to name them, then they begin, and in a conversation, you can see it circle around, that as people begin to name things like racism, economic injustice, sexism, even like, really, I think there's a lot more consciousness now around climate justice, that how we're treating the earth is actually also one of these isms. It's systemic, it's structural, that then folks begin to see that they're all connected, and they're all connected to some people get more benefit than other people. And once you get that, then you start to go, wow, how have I been missing this? And then how can I be an ally? Also, I think, sorry, I'm like jumping a little bit, but I also feel like right now in this present moment, I get for myself that there's lots of places where, as a human being living in a body of a woman, in a woman's body, I have very often stepped right past for myself any ideas about being kept out of things because I'm living in a woman's body. But currently, I have a deep sensitivity about it. That being a woman on the planet means that I am systemically kept out of things. I didn't want to even confront that in the past because I have so much privilege in so many ways. And I think that's important to get, that once we start to see the things showing up for us personally, each of us individually, because of our circumstances and the systems that we're in, we can then say, okay, now I have access to being an ally in the system for the common good. I don't know what it looks like. Yeah, sorry.
No, that all is fantastic and so true. And so I want to do a little shout out at this moment to the Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis.
Yep.
I think this still exists, but for those of you who are listening, you know, archspm.org has an absolutely incredible treasure trove about Catholic social teaching on it.
Yeah.
I really can't recommend it enough. If you have folks who kind of know, we all know that phrase, we know like that umbrella, but if you don't have folks who know the more granular pieces of it, this is work that was done like 20 years ago, but it's just excellent resource for anybody who wants to kind of bring people along about the different buckets, as well as the Bishop USCCB website. And I can do a shout out to the Roman Catholic Church because you know, we have kind of two schools of thought in our movement. One is that we're old Catholics, that we, you know, and it's true that many of us, particularly all the women for sure, trace our lineage to the Union of Utrecht and the changes in the Netherlands that got launched in the early 18th century. But many of us, and I think Jayme and I are in this bucket, really hold fast to our identity as coming out of the Roman Catholic system and our grounding in the vision of Vatican II. And part of it for me, and I think Jayme would agree, is I'm not willing to let go of everything from Rerum Novarum on, including all the teaching of the Second Vatican Council. That's a really important development in Roman Catholic thought that has profoundly shaped me. So if that's something that your community listeners would like to develop, and I really recommend taking a look at the website that the diocese here that Joan and I are sitting in have created. The other thing I was thinking as you were talking, Joan, is, you know, I remember what a profound influence you had on me around the Black Lives Matter movement. Mm. And you know, I thought I had done, you know, decades of anti-racism training and I thought my lights were turned on and all that. And then the Black Lives Matter movement shut down a highway and shut down Mall of America on like Black Friday. And I had a really negative reaction to that. I was sort of like, well, wait a minute, what about all those people who work there? And blah, blah, blah. And you began to help me develop my thinking around why disruption matters at times. And I really want to ask you to talk a little bit about that because it's an area where those of us with language privilege, skin privilege, whatever, often get resistant. Like, you know, good, do that, but don't, you know, we have limits to how much we think you should be disrupting, even though we admire Dr. King and the man helped shut down the, you know, the buses of Montgomery for over a year, right? So I would love you to share about that a little bit because I think it's an area where a lot of us need development.
So I want to say, so I so appreciate your saying that, Trish, because I actually didn't remember it exactly like that. So that's pretty cool to know that those conversations sort of had, you know, bore some fruit for you. I also want to just say that I never went down to shut down a highway. I participated in one shutting down of a road, which was a safe little road in Edina once. So I also want to say that I, you know, may or may not be ready for those kinds of like dedicated to like potentially getting arrested for doing something that's a disruption. But I do believe in disruption as nonviolent protest method. But I want to also say that that Black Lives Matter occurrence, when it happened, for me, I think that what really developed for me was in the earlier movement for marriage equality. I had met several really, really influential young women of color in the movement here. And because they were women of color in the movement here, when Jamar Clark was murdered by police, these young women were the first people at the precinct, and they occupied the vestibule. And then, as you might remember, we had that occupation of the street up there. I think that was the 4th precinct. And their witness and their direct action was so inspirational to me, but also because I knew them personally, because I had been doing the other conversation with them personally, I had this kind of like deep trust and care. And really, I was able to be instructed by them about what was needed, right? So I think that this idea of encounter, of actually really getting related to people, is like so essential in this work. We can't be doing freedom for others if we don't really know people. And we can never really be doing freedom for others. We're doing it for ourselves, because I think the witness of these young women who took on that vestibule and started that whole thing then, their witness and their courage and their like, this is what's needed in this moment of time, was a witness to all of Minnesota. And I think Minneapolis and Minnesota. And it's the seeds for what was happening in this current surge, I think, was trust that the community care and the community standing up was going to follow. So again, like, I think all of this is just this ongoing unfolding of what's required. And again, I have not chosen to put myself in a place yet.
I love what you're saying, though, about, relatedness, because I think, when I think about myself around the issues that you and I have, really worked hard on, I love you. I'm just flashing back to the way you connected all of us to Out Front. When we were working for the marriage amendment and going down to meet with our state rep, who was one of the deciding votes. Let's pat ourselves, Joan and Trish and others. There were, we were, she had a change of heart, a Republican senator, and it cost her her political career. God bless her. Many of my friends are married today because she was willing to put what was right before her political expediency. And then, of course, you mentioned Jamar Clark. We went through, this has been a region of trauma in so many ways here. George Floyd's, horrible lynching on our streets, and the murder of the Hortmans, and the shooting in Annunciation, and then the ICE surge. I do think there's kind of a collective trauma here, but that whole thing about who are you connected to beyond your circle that you can trust, and are you learning from somebody from the community who has something to say to you about what it needs to look like, is, been a critical learning for me over the past 20 years. And you mentioned the ICE surge, and, I'm very active in a group called Isaiah that you know very well, and Faith in Minnesota that you're connected to as well. And I came to realize after about my second time in the presence of Minister Janae Bates Amari, that I would walk into a fire behind Janae. Literally, that's what went through my mind. This is a woman trained in Kingian nonviolence and was leading us in terms of making that visible faith community presence, right there for everybody, as, Renee Good was murdered, as Alex Preddy was murdered, and just listening to her and seeing her clarity, feeling her hope, trusting her vision. I literally, what went through my mind, and it's gone through my mind ever since when I'm with her, I'm like, I'd walk into a fire with this woman. So that building relationships is, just strikes me as so incredibly critical. Jayme, you have that look on your face. Oh, sorry, Joan, jump in.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I'm just fascinated, Joan. But when we speak of various issues, I think if we are going to be honest, then we need to take a look at how it is that we and the institutions in which we've been part have played into injustices in this world as well. I know that in recent years, for instance, the Roman Catholic Church has, has examined its role in and its treatment toward various groups, whether that's indigenous persons, persons of color in various places. I know here in Austin, Texas, the treatment of Mexican and Mexican Americans by the church for many years was an issue. So I think my question for you is essentially that, what do we do when we find ourselves loving institutions which are also comprised of human beings like ourselves who have not always treated one another very well, whether that's our sisters, whether that's members of the LGBTQI plus community. We could go on and on and on. Any thoughtful reflections on what it is that we do? It's like being part of a family. When family members don't treat one another well, how do we navigate these waters of injustice when they hit close to home?
Yes. Oh yeah, that's key. I mean, I think this is sometimes I am nonplussed about it. Sometimes I am like all at sea about it. I don't know what to do. Some days I want to sit just by myself and just be quiet and say, how do we navigate this? But like a family, and like the world, like this greater society of folks, we need to be committed to ongoing conversation about it. And also, really, I think for me, the big piece about that is recognizing when there is movement that is positive movement and recognition for the harm caused, and true, request for possibility of atonement. I'm thinking about, like, right here in Archdiocese, there's been a lot of work on what's gone on here and in this region around the Catholic schools, for the boarding schools, Catholic boarding schools, and the harm to Indigenous people. There's been a lot of recovering of records, of really doing serious research and serious work on that in the Archdiocese around that. And that needs to be applauded, because it's a recognition that, I mean, we have so much work to do to dismantle the doctrine of discovery all the way around. And the fact that our church is recognizing the harm that the church caused is key to all of us, like unlocking the harm that we cause with each other, just in the ways that we matter-of-factly just go along with what the systems have taught us to do and be, and not question. So those moments where in the hierarchical church we can have those conversations give me hope, and we're not done. In our own parish that I work in, we do have a ministry of LGBTQ ally plus and allies. We do have a ministry for women in the church. Our Mary Magdalene ministry is lifting up the role of women in the church. These are ministries of welcome under our justice umbrella that are saying the church isn't complete on this yet, and there's a conversation to be had. And it is kind of well, it's both things. I'd like it to just all be solved. I'd like to be living in where we're moving toward, even though I don't really understand how it's going to look. I really don't. I have no idea what it's going to look like with no oppression. But I think we do have to continue to say, where are the structures of governance that hold all of these systems together? And what does a structure of governance look like that creates equality? I mean, in the Roman Catholic Church, the 3-year synodal synod was remarkable at uncovering these kinds of systemic issues in so many ways. And the magisterial teaching that came out of it has paragraph 60, which is about the women's role in the church. And it states unequivocally that the church has kept women out to the detriment of the church. And this must be addressed. And it also states we cannot stop what the Spirit is doing. That's magisterial teaching in the Roman Catholic Church right now. I don't know what it's going to mean because of our tradition, because we are not done yet being church with each other. I believe that we're going to move in the right direction on all of that.
And in our movement, I'd like to just call out our own reality of being of the DNA that we bring to this movement, the bone marrow. We have Joan and I have a mutual mentor who created a national lay preaching ministry. And I remember when I was stepping out and beginning to do my next thing, Patricia Baumer saying to me, "Oh, Trish, Roman Catholic is a blood type." In other words, it's hard to change. People, we know from the data that Roman Catholics will de-church before they will come to the Lutheran Church or the United Methodist Church. It's so intense the way we're formed. And one of the danger zones in our movement, I think, this is my humble but deadly accurate opinion, is that, we tend to kind of think, oh, well, we've handled that now. Right? Oh, you can get ordained as a woman, or you can be a, married gay man and lead whatever. Well, yeah, but you know what? We still are grappling on so many levels with the patriarchy, which affects both women and gay people, right? And it's hard to call it out. It's hard to say, wait a minute, I want to kind of stop. Let's look at that perspective, whatever. Like, we're not done with our internal work just because we now have a different container for our ministry. So, having compassion for ourselves that we have an inheritance, and we have to be really vigilant as we're, trying to create something new, that we don't just, begin to recreate the structures of oppression that many of us, really had issues with. I'm also thinking, about the whole question of, that's been on my mind, in the months that we've been, working around here with the grave situation in Minnesota, which is, I've been asking myself the question, like, where does my activism come from? I have had many years where my activism came out of anger, pure and simple. And I've had years, and I hope this is more true lately, where my activism comes out of my convictions about my faith.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about, like, the importance of faith community as the ground of what we're doing. And I'm also thinking about, like, what's your experience with the pastoral care of folks who are, by the time they get to the what now question, are feeling fried.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that. Like, how do we help people understand that there's power in being a faith collective? And then what do we do also to recognize that this is a long, long trajectory, and how do we care for each other as we're going down it?
So, key for me in that, I'm so glad you brought it to this, Trish, because you really made present for me some of this work in these Just Faith groups. I know that often people in the middle of, like, discovering something that they didn't know before in sort of real history, kind of when we're looking at racism or economic justice or so forth. And often somebody that has been their historical hero, when they learn more information about real history, will then say, oh, well, I didn't know that, and this is awful, and I thought this person was wonderful, and they're not. And again, like, what I've come to is, we come back to that and look at it and say, it's not personal to that person. That person was acting inside of systems, and the systems actually are getting expressed in some things that are good and some things that are not good. And our faith teaches us right at the start is that we need to be accountable and ask for forgiveness in the places where we failed, but also that forgiveness, reconciliation is always available to us from the start. It's available right away. This is how we actually get to be somebody new and move in the right direction. And so the pastoral care really is about when the anger happens about somebody else, often we're not looking at the shadow side of ourselves and how we're reenacting those kinds of systems too. But if we can have the kind of sense of grace and mercy for the people who are acting in the systems and really get that's systemic, then we can do it for ourselves too. And so we're all able to move forward and to be, forgiving of where we've fallen short. I guess, isn't it Maya Angelou that said something about when you know better, you do better, right? You can't know it before you know it. And we're not all going to know it in the same way all the time. And if we can express always that sense of, I need to share this with you for the sake of relationship in the conversations that matter, then we all know that we're going to all be left whole. And I think that's where faith comes in. It's not about who's good or bad, who's right or wrong, who's winner, who's a loser, but it's about we're all sacred and we're all in this together, no matter what. Yeah.
Joan, one prominent Catholic, Stephen Colbert, has what he calls the Colbert Questionnaire, a way for his audience to better know a person. And so what I'm wondering is if you might be willing to participate in our Cutting Edge Catholics Questionnaire, a way for our audience to be able to get to know you a little better. These are rapid fire questions. You just say the thing that comes to your mind most instantly, and we have a bit of fun with this, okay?
Yep.
Here we go, the Cutting Edge Catholics Questionnaire. Favorite scripture passages, Joan?
It had to be the Luke passage. This scripture passage is fulfilled in your hearing. That is it. That's everything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
People in the church who inspire you.
Our current Pope, the people I interact with at Pax Christi, the ministers that are, doing their best to give expression to their faith every day. Who else? Dorothy Day. I mean, that feels probably too easy, but yeah, Dorothy Day.
A book that shaped your spiritual life.
Oh, that's hard. Okay, big right now for me. It's a book by Eleazar Fernandez. It's called Reimagining the Human, an anthropological theology to address systemic evil.
I love it. A song that feels like prayer to you.
Just everyone. Sorry, rapid fire.
No worries. Your go-to prayer when life gets hard.
Yeah, sorry. A go-to prayer when life gets hard. And all will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well.
Coffee, tea, or something stronger?
Coffee.
A saint you most relate to?
Again, I'd say Dorothy Day.
All right, I'm jumping in here because I think it's Saint Sebastian. I have watched this woman take more arrows in her ministry. Sorry, back to Jayme.
4 more questions. One word the church needs to hear today, Joan.
Be open. One word, open.
Yeah. One word the world needs to hear today.
Love.
Finish this sentence. The gospel is?
The way to peace.
And finally, something that gives you hope this week.
People in ministry, people in community.
Amen. As Stephen Colbert would say, Joan, you are now known, right?
I love that. This is the debut of these questions, Jayme,
oh, wow.
and I think they're really fun. So I've never heard them before either, Joan. I was like, what would I say to that? So good on you for jumping in. So
a song, a book, that's hard.
All right, listen, the thing we didn't mention about Joan Howe-Pullis is she spent time as an equity actor and has one of the most glorious singing voices you have ever heard. And you want her to sing at your funeral. So my goal is to predecease before Joan, and that she has to keep her voice until she's in her 90s, because I really don't want to go anytime soon. So great questions, Jayme. I don't know, maybe we're going to have to try those out on some of our other visitors.
Joan, we've come to the point in our conversation when we tend to think about final words that we'd like to share with our listeners. If you don't mind, I'll jump in first, and then I'll hand it to Reverend Trish, and then we'll give you the final word as we close out today. I just want to say, Joan, on behalf of all of our listeners, what a delight to sit at your feet and to be able to listen to you talk about social justice in the church. It is such an important thing for us in this world in which we are living to be thinking about the various injustices against individuals and against groups of people. So thank you for all that you're doing. Again, as I said earlier, we bow our heads in your direction to you and all our friends in Minnesota and other places who are really bringing to life faith in action. So Joan, thank you, thank you, thank you. You are a saint. We appreciate all that you're doing for our friends there in Eden Prairie. Reverend Trish.
Well, I just loved this conversation, but I love all my conversations with Joan Howe-Pullis. And so a couple of things that really struck me, Joan. Thank you for the gift of so many interesting questions. Um, I think, that's one of the things I'm trying to build muscle in, which is to not, I'm a teacher, God theology professor, to not be teaching so much, but to be asking really good questions of people. I really, really appreciated that. And I really appreciated where Jayme started us, which is when he said to you, tell us about your vocation. And you answered so beautifully and so graciously that, one of the things I think is incumbent upon all of us to remember that we're all called to vocation, and in our movement, not to start collapsing again, that vocations are something that people who get ordained have. But in fact,
Right.
the lay vocation is the profound, avenue through which the world has changed. And, I've watched you over, close to 30 years really grow and develop in your vocation. And it's why I wanted to bring you on our call. It's, we did that journey together as lay women leaders in the church, and to honor that in ourselves, but also honor that in other people, wherever they are on their journey. And we always give our guests the last word. So you get to share anything you'd like to help close us out.
So thanks. Thanks for inviting me to have this conversation today. I guess one of the things that is a sign of hope for me or helps me cope, it always is the conversation. And this has been just such a wonderful way to spend an hour with the two of you. I'm so glad to meet you, Jayme. I'm so grateful for the work that you're both doing, and so many people are doing. So I just have a lot of gratitude for being invited, and I'll carry this into the rest of my weekend and the rest of next week. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Tremendous. Thank you, Joan Howe-Pullis, Director of Social Justice Ministries in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. Thank you as well to all of our listeners. Thank you for joining us for Cutting Edge Catholics, a podcast of renewal, reconstruction, and resistance. I'm Father Jayme Matthias.
And I'm Reverend Trish Sullivan-Vani.
Let's put our faith in action.
Thank you for joining us for Cutting Edge Catholics, a podcast of renewal, reconstruction, and resistance. For more information on inclusive Catholicism, please visit extraordinarycatholics.faith. Keep the faith.